Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a pretty big idea. Is globalization, the interconnected world we've known, actually going backwards?
Yeah, the source we're looking at is Elisabeth Braw's book, Goodbye Globalization, The Return of a Divided World.
And Braw, she's got quite the background, right? Atlantic Council.
Exactly. Senior fellow there, time at RUSI, AEI, writes for Foreign Policy, Politico Europe, FT, Wall Street Journal. She's really plugged into the geopolitics of it all.
So she knows her stuff. What's her main argument then?
Well, essentially she's saying that the era of super intense globalization we saw after the Cold War, it's not just hitting the brakes.
Okay.
She argues it's actually reversing. We're heading towards a more divided, fragmented world.
Wow. Okay, that's a big claim. So understanding that shift is pretty crucial, whether you're in business, policy, or just trying to make sense of the news.
Definitely. She suggests it's not just a dip, it's a fundamental change, sort of echoing times before everything got so hyper-connected.
Right, so let's rewind a bit. What actually kicked off this big globalization boom in the first place?
Well, think back to the early 90s. You had the Iron Curtain fall, suddenly Eastern Europe opens up, huge deal.
Uh-huh.
At the same time, China was really pushing its economic reforms under Deng Xiaoping, joining the global system.
And didn't deregulation play a part too in the West?
Absolutely. Financial deregulation, like under Thatcher in the UK, was a big piece. Governments kind of loosened the reins on banks, finance.
So the thinking was?
The optimism was huge. The idea was, more connection equals shared wealth, more stability. Everyone wins, basically.
Okay, so that was the dream. What, according to Braw, started to unravel it? What's driving this goodbye globalization?
It's really a mix of things.
Yeah.
Geopolitics is a major one. I mean, look at the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage.
A pretty stark symbol, yeah.
Right, of cooperation just eroding. Then you have Russia's actions, Crimea, the full invasion of Ukraine, that led to sanctions, Russia getting cut off from parts of the global economy.
China's role?
Yeah, that's complex. China's economy opened up, but the political system didn't follow in the same way. This created, strategic dependencies.
Dependencies that could be risky.
Exactly. We saw that with, say, Lithuania facing retaliation, or even internally, like the crackdown on Jack Ma. It signals different priorities now, less purely economic.
It feels like a lot of big global events really threw these vulnerabilities into sharp relief.
Totally. The financial crises back in the late 90s and then 2008, they showed just how fast shocks could travel through this interconnected system.
And it wasn't just finance, right?
No, things like the Enron scandal chipped away at trust. And then, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. That was huge for exposing just how fragile these long supply chains were.
We're still seeing the effects, aren't we?
Yeah, like Tesla having to pause its Berlin factory recently because of disruptions in the Red Sea. It's ongoing. Plus concerns about tech, like relying on Huawei. Are these providers actually trustworthy?
And alongside all this, there's been a rise in, economic nationalism?
Definitely. You saw growing dissatisfaction in the West, this feeling that, the benefits of globalization weren't really shared equally.
Which fueled things like Brexit.
Brexit, Trump's Make America Great Again. That protectionist sentiment really took hold.
So the whole view shifted. Interdependence wasn't seen as inherently good anymore.
Pretty much. Instead of thinking, being linked stops wars. The fear became, being linked creates weaknesses others can exploit. Think about Europe's reliance on Russian gas or the West's reliance on Chinese manufacturing.
Okay, so that's Braw's case. How has the book been received? Any critiques?
It's generally been praised. People like Vicky Price highlighted how timely and engaging it is, but there are critiques.
Like what?
Well, some, like Mogdom, feel it needs more historical depth, pointing out globalization has gone in cycles before. Others mention a lack of focus on, say, gender, like the role of women in export industries.
Any other point?
There's the question of a potential Western bias, especially maybe in how China is portrayed. Braw herself kind of acknowledges this complexity. And some critics wanted more on climate change or resource extraction issues.
Right, so it sparked discussion. If Braw's right about this deglobalization trend, what's next? We hear this term friendshoring.
Yeah, friendshoring. Basically, the idea is countries will trade more, invest more with countries they see as politically reliable, as allies, less risk.
So shifting away from
partners seen as strategic risks, like maybe China for some industries. Braw sees trade becoming more regional.
And we see things like the BRICS group exploring alternatives.
Exactly. BRICS looking into different payment systems, that sort of thing. It points to this fragmentation.
What does that mean for businesses then?
It means needing to diversify supply chains, make them more resilient. That might mean higher costs, potentially.
But maybe opportunities, too, within alliances.
Yeah, maybe new opportunities within blocs, like the EU, for instance. It's interesting, some early critics of globalization, like trade unions, worried about jobs moving overseas.
They might feel a bit vindicated now.
Perhaps. Some of their concerns seem to be playing out in this new landscape.
So wrapping it up, Braw's core message is that the era of hyperglobalization is really fading. Geopolitics, security, these are taking precedence over pure economic efficiency now.
That's the gist of it. It's a compelling argument for a fundamental shift.
And it definitely leaves us, and you listening, with something to think about. If we are moving towards a more divided world, what kind of unexpected cooperation or maybe even competition might pop up that we haven't really considered yet?